parliament.gov.jm to download a copy of the new bill. Join the conversation. Make a written submission to Clerk to the Houses, Gordon House, 81 Duke Street, Kingston, or via email clark@japarliament.gov.jm. All written submissions must be sent by Friday, January 29, 2021. Join the process. Let your voice be heard.
Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the sixth and final meeting of the Joint Select Committee meeting on the National Identification and Registration System. I would like all our listeners to participate this afternoon as much as possible. The meeting is in order, and we have a number of our members online, but we have sitting with us here in the banquet hall Minister Favour Williams, Marsha Smith, MP Dwight Sibbles, and we're expecting a couple other members who are, as usual, in traffic on their way. I want to welcome the members who are here and also those who are online. Now, these virtual town hall meetings have responded to a number of issues and questions that have been put to the Joint Select Committee and also to the technical team of the NIDS Secretariat. I would like to inform you that we have had several written submissions and comments which will be addressed when the sittings of the Joint Select Committee return to the Parliament, and I can inform you that the first sitting will be on the 11th of February, when we will start to examine the written contributions that have been made to the Parliament, and these will be addressed from the 11th and continue in February, and depending on how many contributions we receive into March. I want to indicate and remind, as I said yesterday, that although we had indicated that the date for the final submission is the 29th of January, we have extended the time to the 15th of February to allow persons to put in their written submissions. And those persons who put in written submissions, if they want to appear before us in Parliament, they will be invited to do so. As I indicated in one of the first virtual town hall meetings, we wrote in excess of 100 institutions, organizations, institutions who should be interested in this NIDS bill. We have had returns from a few, and interestingly, these returns of the parties have examined the bill and indicated that they're happy with the bill. But we don't expect all the institutions to be happy with the bill. If you have concerns, if you have any suggestions, any amendments that you want to propose, we have no difficulty in responding to the recommendations, the suggestions, so that the Joint Select Committee can consider them. So enough time, additional time will be given to up to the 15th of February for these contributions to be made. We have, over the past 5 virtual town hall meetings, responded to many concerns. And in this final sessions, we will be responding to many other concerns. But we are happy today to firstly identify once again the members of the NIDS technical team, Mr. Warren Vernon, the Program Director of the NIDS, Mrs. Sharika Hemmings-Allison, Principal Director in the Office of the Prime Minister, Mrs. Janelle Miller-Williams, the Senior Legal Officer in the Prime Minister's Office, Miss Nadine Wilkins and Miss Kamika Fisher will be online. But this evening, we have a special treat in that we have two special guests who will really have a number of points to make and to say how the NIDS card and the NIDS bill itself will affect them. So we would like to welcome our two special guests, Mr. Andrew Winter, the Chief Executive Officer of PICA, otherwise known as the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency, and Mr. Innes de Powell, the man to whom we pay all our taxes, who is the Commissioner General of the Tax Administration of Jamaica. Welcome, Mr. Winter and Mr. Powell. Now, this evening, we are going to have, as our new moderator, Mr. Richard Della Pena. And, you know, in the interest of gender balance, we have had two females, so it's only appropriate that we should have a male this afternoon. So welcome, Richard, and we now turn over to you to engage the public and also the members of the NIDS and team and our guests and the Joint Select Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. It is indeed my pleasure to be here moderating this, our final and sixth and final Joint Select virtual meeting. I am Richard Della Pena, and I am your moderator for today's session. Welcome to those watching us on TVJ, PBCJ, GIS, Scene TV, and all other social media platforms, the NIDS fax pages, the Prime Minister's Twitter and Facebook pages, and to those listening to us on News Talk 93 FM and also on the various media outlets that we have. Over the last 3 weeks, the public has been engaged and learning about the NIDS and the National Identification and Registration Bill 2020. Now, over the next couple of minutes, we will be sharing some insights into how this NIDS is expected to help transform the public sector, focusing on PICA and TAJ. And of course, we'll get into that later down in the program. We will also highlight other relevant clauses of the National Identification and Registration Bill 2020. Remember, viewers, you can also participate by using the hashtag JSC NIDS to participate. But before we get into the program, let's remind our viewers and listeners about what this National Identification System is. And at this time, we're going to share with you a video.
You've probably heard of the National Identification System, or NIDS. Here are a few facts to help you understand even better.
What is the NIDS?
The National Identification System, or NIDS, is made up of the National Identification Databases, the National Identification Number, or NIN, the National Identification Card, or the NIC, and all the processes, networks, services, and measures associated with the enrollment of the individuals and the verification of identity.
What are the objectives of the NIDS bill?
The proposed objectives of this bill include providing for the enrollment of eligible individuals in the national identification databases, the assignment and use of the NIN or NIN, and the issue of an NIC or NIC to enrolled individuals, and the prevention of identity theft and other types of fraud relating to identity information. The NIDS is proposed to create a secure and reliable way of proving the identity of enrolled individuals through the use of a single document, a national identification card.
So how can I sign up for enrollment?
Citizens of Jamaica and individuals who are resident in Jamaica will be eligible for enrollment. A resident is one who has lived in Jamaica for a continuous period of 6 months immediately prior to applying for enrollment, or if the individual has been granted permission under immigration laws to enter and remain in Jamaica for the purpose of study.
How can I sign up?
Eligible individuals may apply to the authority for enrollment. The authority will be required to inform the individual that enrollment is voluntary and that the individual may cancel enrollment at any time. The authority will also be required to say why the information is being collected, the purpose for which the information will be used, the steps to be taken by the authority to verify the information, the individual's right of access to the information, and the right of the individual to appeal any decision made by the authority concerning the identity information of that individual. The bill takes into account the different types of individuals who may wish to enroll. For example, minors, individuals who are in places of safety, persons in correctional institutions, mentally incapable individuals, and those who are in the Witness Protection Program. For the purposes of enrollment, it is proposed that biographic, biometric, and numerical information may be required to be collected by the authority. The biographic information of the individual includes their full name, their date of birth, whether the individual is male or female, their marital status, as well as their occupation. The biometric information refers to the facial image, fingerprints, and manual signature where the applicant is 18 years and older. By way of numbers, the individual's taxpayer's registration number, passport number, or electoral registration number may be collected where applicable.
What's the idea behind an NIN?
Now, the National Identification Number, or NIN. It is proposed that a unique NIN will be permanently assigned, and the National Identification Card, or the NIC, will be issued to every enrolled individual whose information has been verified by the authority. The NIN will be randomly selected, and the digits will not relate to any attribute of the enrolled individual. The number will not be assigned or reassigned to any individual. It is unique to you. Importantly, the NIN may not be cancelled and remains assigned to one individual even after that person has died. The NIC, or the card, is proposed to be the proof of identity of the enrolled individual, which will not be transferable to any other person.
If I sign up, can I cancel at any time?
An enrolled individual may request cancellation of enrollment at any time, and the authority must cancel the enrollment. Where the cancellation is upon the request of the individual, it is proposed that the identity information will no longer be processed unless the authority is mandated to do so under the Data Protection Act. It may also cancel enrollment if the information in the National Identification Database is inaccurate. Once enrollment is cancelled, the authority must advise the individual of the cancellation, and that person is no longer entitled to use the NIN. Additionally, the NIC, or the card issued to that individual, must be surrendered. If the individual chooses to re-enroll, that person will be issued with the same NIN.
All right, welcome back. So that was just a quick recap of what is the National Identification System NIDS, and also what we can expect in the new proposed bill. So we're going to start off the conversation this evening, and we're going to be talking for the first couple of minutes to Mr. Andrew Winter, and he is the CEO for PICA. So Mr. Winter, welcome to our final town hall meeting. We want to start off with those who are not aware about the functions of PICA. Just give us an overview of what PICA does.
Thank you, the Chairman and other members of the panel and the Joint Select Committee. The Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency is the government agency which is responsible for the issuance of passports and other travel documents which are used in the island of Jamaica. We also provide immigration services and immigration products such as extension of stay, visas, permanent residence, and other benefits which will allow persons to remain in the island of Jamaica. We are also the agency that is responsible for granting citizenships to foreign nationals who wish to become citizens of Jamaica, or Jamaicans whose children were born overseas and they would like them to become citizens of Jamaica. They are also facilitated by the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency. We're also part of the Ministry of National Security architecture, in that we are one of the primary agencies with responsibility for providing security, border security at our ports of entry, airports, seaports, and cruise ship areas. We also work in conjunction with other agencies such as the Ministry of Labor to ensure that foreign nationals who are working in the island of Jamaica have the appropriate immigration status, and also to facilitate other persons who may wish to come to Jamaica to study or participate in programs which would require them to have some kind of temporary stay or some kind of immigration status while they're in the island of Jamaica.
Okay, thank you. So in your organization, identification of citizens and residents is nothing new for you?
That is correct. The agency is responsible for issuing passports, and I'd say that from birth to death, you're entitled to your passport. From the day a child is born, a day old, he can obtain his passport. And it's when you're a minor, your passport is valid for 5 years, and upon becoming an adult, your passport is validated for 10 years.
All right, good. So we're learning a little bit more about PICA and the services that they're offering. So if you're just joining us, remember you can participate in the conversation by using the hashtag JSC NIDS. Right, so we're going to continue the conversation. On the clause 19 of this NIR bill, the bill makes provisions for what we refer to as a prima facie, the card bearer's particulars, right? Now, can you say if PICA is currently reviewing the processes that you have in place to remove Section G, and maybe you can just explain what Section G is on the passport application form?
Section G is a declaration of the identity of the person, which is usually done by a justice of the peace, attorney at law, minister of religion, and there are no more persons who are authorized. This is particularly important as it relates to first-time applicants. So as we go forward, the Section G, especially for first-time applicants, is a very important area. And as we go through and review the NIDS legislation and look at the passport legislation, and we look at the similarities in information that is collected, then no doubt the process will eventually evolve. But I'd like to quickly point out where persons cancel their enrollment, then the Section G of the passport application form would be applicable, and as such the process would require for it to remain there. Currently, with adult renewal, we have what we call a simplified renewal, and because we already have the majority of the data for the adult, there is currently, that section is not there, and a JP doesn't have to do that declaration now.
Okay, so what are the possibilities for the reuse of the identification data, when applying by using a NIDS card?
Well, certainly as we look at the integration of systems and the validation of the data, then certainly I see opportunities going forward. And as such, the important thing is that the identity of the person in the NIDS as well as in the passport is validated, and the credential to ensure that that unique identity remains is going to be the critical element in the process.
Okay, all right, so we're going to now move to the online processes that you have in place for especially the renewal of passports. What are some of those plans that you have in place to simplify those processes online?
Currently, and I am happy to share with everyone here, if you would like to renew your adult passport, we have an online facility, and that has really helped to simplify the process, particularly in this time now. You can go online and complete your passport renewal, and this is for adults only. The online facility right now is just limited to renewal. Going forward, we anticipate in the years to come, it will be open to allow persons who may be applying for the first time, but that will be predicated on the fact that the information that they are providing online, we have our ability to validate that information to ensure that the information that will be uploaded into the system is unique, again, to the identity of the person that is applying online. So where NIDS would provide that kind of reassurance and security of the identity and the unique identity credential for that person, then I certainly see that there will be an opportunity in the future for us now to share that, use that data to facilitate first-time applicants going forward and in the future.
Okay, very, very good stuff that we're hearing here coming out of PICA. What are some of those plans now? Let us look at last year, January, the PKI project was launched under the NIDS project. And, you know, what are PICA's plans for, let's say, e-gates, you know, and how would a national ID, you know, card help you to clear even customs?
As it relates to the public key infrastructure, that is one of the bases which we are working on now for us to develop the requirement for us to implement what is called an electronic passport. An electronic passport is a passport that will have a chip which will have the information as it relates to the applicant. That is an even more secure travel credential than what we have now, and it also will help to reinforce and reassure the Jamaicans that their passport, the identity that they have in their passport, cannot be copied or forged. It also speaks to international standards which are being adopted by many countries. Even in the Caribbean, where approximately 11 countries in CARICOM have already adopted e-passport, and that strengthens the whole identity of the individuals applying for travel documents. As it relates to the national identification card, the agency is looking currently at implementing electronic gates as part of its efforts to use risk-based data-driven inspection system to encourage travel facilitation. And where the travel facilitation, the national identification card, is integrated or can be implemented, then certainly the identity of those persons, the Jamaicans in the first instance, would be facilitated to use the e-gates, which would give them faster clearance to come back when they return to the island of Jamaica.
So, I know we have had many problems with identification and so on. Could you sort of indicate to the public what problems have you had with any identification problem, and how have you been able to overcome it so far?
Yes, Minister. Over the years, one of the issues, one of the main challenges that PICA has had over the years is persons have tried to obtain more than one passport for a variety of reasons. And as a result of that, persons have stolen persons' identity, which they have used to travel abroad and obtain benefits. And when they now apply for the right owner of that identity, apply for a passport, it does create an issue. A few years ago, the agency implemented what is called the facial recognition system. And as a result of that, we have been able to identify persons who have applied on multiple occasions. And we are now able to successfully prosecute many of those persons. I think last year alone, probably close to 200 persons were prosecuted for fraudulent identity.
And this is in the past few years, 200 persons.
Well, that was probably just for last year.
Last year.
Yeah. And since we have implemented the system, we have been going through, and it has brought to our attention where unscrupulous persons have been attempting to use. And what it has also helped to provide us with is the kind of measures or kind of things that persons will do in terms of trying to obtain fraudulent birth certificates and other supporting documents to support this fraudulent identity to obtain a passport. So by having the facial recognition, we have been able to now establish beyond a reasonable doubt many of the correct identities of persons, and this is now helping to provide reassurance not only for the Jamaicans but even to our international partners that when a person comes with a Jamaican passport, the person who is presenting that passport is the genuine holder of the identity of that passport.
You know, Mr. Winter, we have been speculating and saying that there have been questions of multiple persons trying to get multiple passports. So I'm very happy that you have been able to clarify and confirm what we have been saying here. How has facial recognition assisted you?
It has been an invaluable assistant, Minister, because, you know, it's surprising how many Jamaicans look alike. But however, there are certain unique identifiers.
Yes.
Date of birth, place of birth, parents, and other things which help us, and because our persons have been properly trained with assistance from our international partners, we have been able to identify many persons. And we also know that there are unique situations which sometimes impact a person's identity. For example, a person might meet in a motor vehicle accident, and that might cause some disfigurement of their facial features. And as such, we know how to compensate for those things. And, you know, there are other things sometimes which affect persons. And even persons who have decided to change their complexion from darker to lighter, your facial features still remain the same. So we are still able to identify you.
Yeah. So the facial feature recognition is one of the strengths of PICA.
Yes, Minister.
So the likelihood we have been indicating that will be one feature of the NIDS system. What I want to thank you, Mr. Winter, is to confirm what we have been speculating, that indeed there have been challenges with persons getting more than one passport, and you said there have been 200 cases of possible identity fraud just last year alone.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Winter.
In fact, I just want to add some more data to that. Over the period 2009 to 2019, there were 2,499 passport fraud cases that were actually detected by PICA. Right? So Mr. Winter, talk to us. How far advanced is this e-passport?
Well, Cabinet late last year, gave the approval for us to go ahead. So we're currently in discussions with the supplier in terms of now looking at putting the infrastructure and everything in place. So we're well advanced. In fact, in March, we will be meeting to have discussion to finally start the rollout, the implementation process, to look at what is required and the equipment that is required and the changes that we will have to make in the producing of the passports. And we are going to work through now to see how quickly we can actually start the implementation. That what is also helping the process is with the implementation of the public key infrastructure, which will play a critical role in the successful implementation of the e-passport.
And for those who are not aware what a public key infrastructure is, just give us a quick definition of what a PKI is.
Well, the public key infrastructure is encrypted. I think Mr. Vernon is more proficient at it, but it's pretty much a encrypted facility which will provide each person with a unique certificate of identity. So we know that that individual, all their information is properly encrypted and properly secured, and we are then able to upload that information into the electronic chip in the passport, so the uniqueness of the identity remains.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. And now we're going to go over to the money man in the room, Mr. Ainsley Powell. And before we go over to him, I just want to remind our viewers and listeners that you can remember to submit your questions. You can also use the hashtag JSC NIDS, JSC NIDS. And I also want to just remind our viewers of the committee members. We have, Honorable Delroy Chuck, who is the committee chairman. We have Honorable Favor Williams. We have Honorable Marley Malahoo Ford, Miss Marsha Smith, Honorable Marsha Smith, Honorable Robert Nestor Morgan, Mr. Dwight Sibley's, Mr. Julian Robinson, Mr. Hugh Graham, and Mr. Aubin Hill, Senator Peter Bunting, Senator Charles Sinclair, Senator Ransford Graham, and Senator Donna Scott Motley. So those are the members of the committee, the Joint Select Committee. And if you're just joining us, you're in tune to the last or the final in a series of virtual Joint Select Committee meetings that we're looking at the National Identification and Registration Bill 2020. And you would have just gotten some insight from PICA, the CEO for PICA, Mr. Andrew Winter. And now we're going to go to you, Mr. Powell. Just quickly, tell us, define for us what a TAJ, what are some of the services that you offer to the public?
Well, tax administration in Jamaica has the responsibility to administer the major taxes. Okay. Yes, sorry about that.
That's all right.
To administer the major taxes, and also it is the principal collecting agency for government. So we collect a wide range of fees and taxes. In fact, we have registered about 270 thereabout different tax types and fees that we can collect from time to time. We have the responsibility for assessing persons who might have failed to pay or declare their taxes, and of course do the necessary collection of those amounts.
So what is critical to your organization in terms of identification?
Well, identification is critical because, as you know, we rely on the use of a taxpayer registration number, the TRN. And in order to process that, we have to ask for an identifier for persons to do that registration. And it is very critical in terms of ensuring that we minimize any possibility of issuing duplicate TRNs, and that in the event of use of that TRN, persons are duly assigned to that number. Because we have had incidents where persons may have access to a number which is a valid number, but they are using it to assume the identity of the person to whom that number is assigned.
But tell us some more about that, because how is it that someone could take my TRN number and transact business?
Well, remember, if you have a TRN number or a card, there is no, for instance, picture ID.
Oh.
There is nothing to really match you to that card. So once you present that card, you are likely to be assumed that you are the person associated with that number.
All right, so under clause 25 of this bill, it makes provisions for verification and authentication of identity information. Now, what are some of the services that you currently have that you're reviewing to adopt this national identification card?
Currently, we have about 11 services that we are reviewing. So we have TRN application, e-service registration, tax clearance certificate application, motor vehicle registration, renewal of driver's license, new driver's licenses, certificate of fitness, GCT registration, filing of tax return, payment of traffic tickets, and police records payment. Mm-hmm. So those are the 11 things that we are looking at.
So for those listening to us, I just want to be very clear that for those listening to us, the national identification card will help directly.
Oh yes, yes, it will enhance the security feature around these transactions. So, for instance, we currently have a partial online TRN registration, and the reason for that is persons will have to come and physically establish who they are, etc., with probably a passport, birth certificate, to identify themselves for us to process or issue that number. This would for instance, significantly assist us in doing an full online registration. So we're looking forward to that, and that is one of the first areas that we're trying to address the use of the name.
So I could stay home, do all my business without having to go to a tax office.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so what are some of the plans in the future for additional services?
All right, the plan in the future is for additional services that will require identification. So if you were to transfer a motor vehicle, for instance, or want to transfer a motor vehicle, we could do that in a digital space by having means of identifying that the persons who are conducting that transactions are who they are. Our registration for e-services requires an in-office visit to register to go online to do your business digitally. And so we are hoping that we'll be able to move into that space where persons can use that means of identification, verification online to access those services.
All right, so once again, so as it is now, yes, you can do some services online.
Some, yeah.
Right, but you still have to go
You
inline.
still have to go inline, yeah.
Okay.
Either to start the process or sometimes to conduct.
Yes, because that is a concern that a number of Jamaicans have. They say, yes, but we can do online services now. What else would need to do? But you're saying that, yes, even though you can do it online, you still have to go inline to verify your identity.
Right. We are currently seeking to go online for renewal of motor vehicle registration. And if this were in place, then that would have a great enhancement in the security of that system. So we are still pursuing with it, but at a lower level of security for persons to be able to have their motor vehicle registration take place online. Okay. And so those kind of changes would bring a higher level, as I said, of security to the platform.
All right, so I'm going to ask a question now. Do you see on a day-to-day basis, or maybe a week-by-week basis, where persons come in, they use other person's TRN number, trying to be and do services with that number?
Yeah, that does occur, and it occurs on the basis that persons, for instance, will ask persons to do transactions for them. So I may, for instance, ask you to renew my motor vehicle registration, or you might ask to pay some taxes. And so persons do share their TRN in that regard. And so we're hoping that we can tighten that aspect of it and ensure that the proper identification is in place.
Okay, beautiful. So you envision in the future that a national identification card would help to reduce some level of identity fraud?
Yes, yes. Okay. And that's the next step that we're looking at in our phasing in, where persons who come in, once they have a card, then that card would be used to identify that they are the persons for us to do that transaction. So like, for instance, motor vehicle transfers. That is important to identify that is the owner of the vehicle that is actually signing over that asset, ownership of that asset to the other person. And so those are some of the things that we're
looking at. So we have a question here coming in from Floyd on social media. Will there still be the need for a TRN if one registers in NIDS?
All right. The short answer is yes, but let me explain why. When you look at the population of taxpayers and the use of the TRN, it's wider than the persons who are eligible to have a NID. And that is because persons who are required to pay taxes or do transaction with us might not even be resident or within the island. You have persons who are, and that is the same number that we use for system that we use to give numbers to companies or businesses, and therefore we'll still have to maintain that structure in order to facilitate that kind of situation.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so Mrs. Williams, we're going to come back to you. Well, come to you now to just go through for us. Yes, go ahead. We have a question here from Senator Aubin.
My good friend Commissioner, I would have to have a question for you. I wondered if on the TRN issue, that the answer you give would not apply a great deal at the beginning of NIDS, but over time, NIDS would probably overtake in terms of spread across the nation, and so then it would really, it could eventually replace a TRN, or is there a particular practical legal reason why it could not?
Well, there are practical reasons. So the question, I think...
I don't mean initially. I mean, say over 3-4 years.
Down the road, yes. Definitely for persons who are resident or citizens.
But I think
it
though...
can become the primary means once they have those cards.
I must admit, I thought at one stage that no, but I thought at one stage that would be possible. But why the question is, companies, businesses have TRN, but they wouldn't have NIN. So you see, I can see where the TRN would still be necessary for non-individuals.
But that was not the question.
Yes.
The question that the moderator asked was about people.
Yes. Oh, admittedly.
Yeah. Not about, so you have to make sure it's clear.
Yes.
You're answering, that portion of the answer is not related to the question.
Right.
The question is related to the people, but over time, NIDS would take over for people, and that's why I said, is there a particular legal reason? Now, when you make it broader for non-people, clearly, your TRN is a requirement. But for people, over time, would NIDS take over?
Yes, but remember, I pointed out the population of taxpayers may not necessarily in full be eligible to have a NID.
Yeah, MP civils, yes.
Right. So we have to look at that subset. So for instance, persons registering companies they are resident overseas. Right? We need to have a means of identifying those persons. Persons might be doing land transactions. We need to identify those persons. Persons may have income in Jamaica, subject to tax, but they are not resident in Jamaica. And so we have to have that duality. Now, in terms of persons who are eligible, once persons are willing to use their TRN, from how I understand it, then we are in good stead. So once most of the population has it, then to access the service, then that could become the primary or dominant number. But somewhere in the picture, the TRN has to remain.
So yes, so where you're relating to people who are not resident in Jamaica, but have a right to do business in Jamaica, would not have a NIDS card because you have to be resident here.
Yes.
But if you're a resident here over time, it would probably overtake.
That would change, yes.
Right. I must tell you, Mr. Powell, when people ask me for my TRN, I go for my driver's license.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I don't know it. So it is on a driver's license, I see my TRN. Yeah. I mean, is it like that sometime in the future that the NIN could be the number on the driver's license?
That's a possibility. Yes, that would be a good thing, because we have put forward a concept for a new driver's license system, and we have to have shared with our stakeholders.
Okay.
And they are expressing interest in that. And really what we're talking about is an end-to-end. So when you're applying for that driver's license, you need to identify yourself.
Absolutely.
You need to pay. And so if it starts from there, and we're talking about possibility of facial recognition.
Absolutely.
So even with the renewal, you could have online renewal without persons have to come and to sit before us.
That would ease a great burden, Mr. Powell.
Right.
I have to tell you that when I go to renew my driver's license, when I go to the Kingston tax office, people are very kind to me. They see me and they will say, "Minister, come."
Yeah.
But in all sincerity, I'm cutting the line for about 20 or 30 people waiting in line.
Right.
So I would really like for that process to be eased up.
Right.
Because sometimes I say, no, I'll wait. But they say, no, Minister, you're busy.
So even now, what we're doing is a halfway house, so to speak. So we're saying you need to drop off with a passport size picture.
Absolutely.
etc. And in picking it up, you need to pick it up in person so we can identify that it is you that's getting this driver's license. And so it would go a long way in terms of tying up the whole identification of persons from start to finish.
Wonderful.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so Mrs. Williams, we're going to pick up with you now as it relates to the clause-by-clause explanation. Yesterday we would have looked at the appeals tribunal, and today we're going to ask you to just pick up with the various clauses.
Okay, thank you for that, Richard. So yesterday we ended with clause 30, which speaks to secrecy and confidentiality. Today I will start with clause 31, protection from liability. Clause 31 provides that no civil proceedings, no criminal proceedings, or professional sanctions may be imposed against any person who provides information requested by the authority in good faith. Furthermore, no suit or proceeding may be brought against an officer of the authority in respect of any lawful act made in good faith. So this clause provides for the protection from liability.
Oh, okay.
In respect of clause 32, the imposition of fees, this clause empowers the authority to impose fees for services that they may provide. Clause 33 speaks about the regulations. It empowers the authority to make regulations with the approval of the minister, and such regulations may concern the forms to be used in any application, and also procedures and practices followed by the authority, such as for collection of information, storage, verification, and also confidentiality and secrecy of information stored in the national databases. In respect of clause 35, that speaks about the review of act. Clause 35 provides that the act shall be reviewed from time to time by Parliament, the first of which shall take place after the expiration of 3 years from the first day appointed. Clause 36 speaks
Before you continue though, Mrs. Williams, may I just say to the public at large, yes, in 3 years' time, we will review the bill to see how it is operating, any defects, any concerns. But at this time, members of the public, other persons, we are on the first review. In other words, the bill is now before Parliament, and therefore, these town hall meetings, the Joint Select Committee, the bill is under scrutiny to make sure that we get the best bill possible for the start of the system. And that is why we have come to you, members of the public, to ask you to have a look at the bill, to ask institutions to have a look at the bill, so that any amendments, any proposal, any suggestion can be taken into consideration now. But once the bill goes into operation, in 3 years' time, we will look at it again to see if it is operating as we anticipate it will. Thanks.
Yes. Clause 36 speaks about the transitional. It provides for the effective transition from the former department to the authority. And the former department meaning the Registrar General's Department. This clause sets out that all the assets, the rights, liabilities, proceedings, remedies, data, and records that vests in the Registrar General is to be vested in the authority. In respect of persons who are permanently appointed in the Registrar General's Department, it is proposed that those persons will be transferred on secondment to the authority for a period of 6 months or such period as may be approved by the board. And in terms of the terms and conditions must not be less favorable than they enjoyed in the former department. In respect of persons who are under contractual arrangement, they shall continue in the office to be established within the authority, and also under no less favorable conditions than the former department. So that is clause 36 that speaks about transitional. Clause 38 speaks about the repeal, and it indicates that the National Identification Registration Act of 2017 is to be repealed.
All right. So we're going to go now to Mrs. Allison, and I want you to talk to us some more about the organizational structure of this authority.
Thank you, Richard. So we recall that Clause 5 of the bill proposes to establish the National Identification and Registration Authority, and it will be a body corporate, which means that it can be sued in its own name and it can sue in its own name. So if we look, for example, at Clause 5 of the bill, it also proposes to establish within that authority an office that will be called the Office of the Registrar General, which, under the management and control of the authority, will be responsible for carrying out the functions of the Registrar General now. So the functions of the Registrar General will therefore be transferred to the office within that authority, and the Chief Executive Officer of the authority will be responsible for the operations of that office. So it goes further to speak about the Board of Management. So Clause 6 of the bill proposes to establish a Board of Management which will comprise 15 members, 4 of whom will be ex officio members, and the remaining 11 will be appointed by the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister, given after consultation with the Leader of the Opposition. And if we look, for example, at Part 2 of the first schedule, you'll see further details in relation to the composition of the board and so on. So essentially, that Board of Management will be responsible for overseeing the general administration of the authority, and it must ensure that the operations of the authority are in keeping with the Data Protection Act and all other laws that are relevant to the operations of the authority. We could go on to say that the bill proposes to have the board give directions to the Chief Executive Officer in respect of the management of the authority. It's also proposed that the board, after consultation with the minister, will appoint the Chief Executive Officer as well as such number of Deputy Chief Executive Officers as the authority deems appropriate. So the role and function of the Chief Executive Officer will be to ensure that the day-to-day management of the authority is efficient. In relation to the appointment of employees of the authority, the CEO, with the approval of the board, will be responsible for employing those persons.
Okay, so quick question. Will there be any exemptions for being appointed to the board?
Pardon?
Exemptions. Any exemptions from being appointed to the board?
So if we look, for example, at the schedule, I think it's the third schedule, when we look at the schedule, it tells us who are eligible for appointment. Okay. So, for example, the 11 members who are to be appointed by the Governor General, those persons, I need some help.
All right, so while she looks for that, we have a question here coming in from Mr. Garnet Brown, and he's asking, will or would the NERA be given whistleblower status for direct channel to the office of the DPP?
Well, the issue there is that if we have the Protected Disclosure Act, which is generally known as the Whistleblower Act, if there are compromises, corruption in the NERA, then one would expect that the whistleblower would inform the relevant authority, of which the DPP is one of the relevant authority. But only Tuesday of this week, we made the Integrity Commission the designated authority to deal with the Protected Disclosure Act. So anywhere in the government sector, including the NERA, to the extent that there is corruption or problems, certainly it can be referred to the Integrity Commission. If it is a criminal offense, yes, the DPP.
Okay. All right. So, Garnet, that was your answer. So we're going to go back over to Mrs. Hem.
I wanted to find the provision that was applicable to the question. And the schedule, which speaks to the Board of Management of the authority, it says that an individual is eligible to be appointed as a member of the board if that individual is a national of Jamaica, is 18 years of age or older, has not been convicted of an offense involving fraud, dishonesty, or moral turpitude, and is not and has not been a member of either of the houses of Parliament, and is not and has not been a member of the council of a municipal corporation, city municipality, or town municipality, and so on. So that schedule, part 2, sets out some of the eligibility criteria for being a board member.
Okay, beautiful. So just recap for us the various, the main elements. So you have the authority, and then you have, what do you have after that? The authority above the authority.
So what I want us to look at is the fact that there will be an inspectorate, and this will be an independent oversight body. And if we recall from the Supreme Court's ruling, the court was concerned that there was no independent oversight body that was mandated to conduct an audit of the authority. And so when we went back to the drawing board, we ensured that there would be this independent oversight authority. And so if we look at clause 27 of the bill, it proposes to establish an independent oversight authority called the National Databases Inspectorate. And details of this is provided in the 3rd schedule of the bill. So this inspectorate will comprise members who will be appointed by the Governor General upon the advice of the Prime Minister after consulting with the leader of the opposition. And so the membership will include a registered public accountant, an ICT professional with expertise in mission critical systems with high security, a retired judge of the Supreme Court or Court of Appeal, and so on. And the clause 27 further proposes that the inspectorate will importantly monitor compliance with the Act and all laws concerning the protection or confidentiality of identity information. It will also conduct periodic inspections of the authority to ensure that its operations are conducted in accordance with established principles. And some of the powers that the inspectorate will be granted will be the power to audit the operations of the authority, including looking at the processes for the collection and storage of identity information. And it will also have the power to require the attendance before it any officer or agent of the authority or any subcontractor of any such agent. So those are some of the key provisions in relation to the organization structure.
Will the inspectorate have the powers to prosecute?
The inspectorate, well, in terms of prosecution, we know that the inspectorate has the power to refer some matters to the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Integrity Commission, the Auditor General, the Commissioner of Police, the Director of MOCA, as the inspectorate deems appropriate.
You know, Richard, it's interesting that Mrs. Allison emphasized that the inspectorate was a result of the Supreme Court decision. And that Supreme Court decision, in fact, was quite significant. And what is interesting is 245 pages. I must tell you, I read every page. Right? And I know that the NIDS Secretariat studied that bill because it had to respond to the concerns of the constitutional challenge that was in that bill. And so in this bill, we have repealed that bill. That's what Section 37 is saying. We have repealed that bill, and that is, the new bill is now in place. But it had several features in that bill which we are not utilizing, like the mandatory enrollment, the inspectorate, connection to the Data Protection Act. We're not using any biometric, that DNA evidence. So we have restricted the biometric to just the facial recognition and fingerprint, and then also your signature. So that this bill, to my mind, has responded to that Supreme Court decision. And that Supreme Court decision, to help the members of the public, it analyzed the last bill, but also looked at several identification systems in several other countries, especially India, where it examined, you know, a massive 1,400-page decision of the Supreme Court of India. 1,400 pages. So that you can see that a lot of work has gone into not only the Supreme Court decision, but also in ensuring that we have a bill which we feel is good, not perfect, and that is why we have brought it to the public and asked the public to examine it. And if you have any improvement, we are willing to look at it.
Okay. So Chairman, you just brought up what is happening in India. And they have the Aadhaar system, Mr. Vernon. And so we have a question here. How does NIDS differ from a country such as Estonia? Right? They have a system in place, which is also cited as the gold standard. How is NIDS different from this?
Thank you, Richard. The first thing I would say is that the Estonian government implemented a mandatory national ID, and the government of Jamaica is proposing to implement a non-mandatory national ID. So the government of Jamaica is proposing to implement a non-mandatory national ID. So like the Estonian system, all identity verification requests will be logged, and the identity owner will also be notified. Similar to the Estonian system, our national ID card will also be used as a tool for digital signature. We will also be able to use the card to securely sign into government services and also services in the private sector. The government of Jamaica, similar to the Estonian infrastructure or legal framework, is proposing to implement, as mentioned earlier, an independent oversight body, which is a databases inspectorate. And the government of Jamaica will also set up the Information Commissioner's Office under the data protection law. So all of those, what I call good practices that we adopted from those countries that are doing well, will be incorporated in the NIDS. So at the end of the day, the Jamaican National Identification System will be on par with all of the leaders, you know, around the world. I also want to add that, like Estonia, Jamaica has the potential, with the implementation of a national identification system and the digitization of what I call critical or high-risk services. And our colleagues from tax admin and also PICA would have mentioned some of those services. So with the implementation of a national ID and the digitization of those high-risk services to basically jump on the corruption perceptions index, we believe, just like Estonia, have the potential to jump somewhere about 15 points. Why? Because a national ID is going to bring to the table significant transparency, and this is very important for us to note. If you look at the 2020 corruption perceptions index, there are a lot of views out there as to why the other countries are doing well. But if you check now for yourself, all of those countries that are closer to 100, they all have a national identification system in place that is linked to transparency, to the distribution of government services, contracts, everything within government. All of those services that are connected to corruption or high-risk services that those transactions are logged and protected. So it's a significant way forward for us.
All right. So we have a question here from social media again. Isn't it true to say that with the removal of NIDS being mandatory, it is basically toothless?
You know,
toothless.
Yeah. Let us be frank. A mandatory system is the ideal system. And as Mr. Vernon mentioned, that is what pertains in Estonia. We, however, have a Charter of Rights that protects the right to privacy. And because when one reads the Chief Justice's judgment in the Supreme Court case, that right to privacy allows an individual to be able to, you know, live in his cocoon without being interfered with. And not only that, in a democracy, freedom of choice is also a right. So the individuals in our democracy has a right to choose whether or not to be on the system. However, it also imposes a heavy burden on the NIDS team to ensure that we have a system that the citizens of Jamaica can have confidence in, and therefore they will want to be on the system. Moreover, as PICA and the TAJ, the tax administration, have pointed out, if you have a NIDS card, it will make matters easier for you. So once we enter the system, admittedly a voluntary system, once citizens of Jamaica feel that it is beneficial to have the card, then I strongly believe that the turnout will be in the 90, perhaps close to 99%, because the fact that it is easier to access the services of PICA, TAJ, the private sector, generally to get into the educational system, and so many benefits, that without the card, the obstacle is not as difficult. Then I hope that without the mandatory nature of this card, the vast majority of Jamaicans will register and get a card. Minister Hill.
Chairman and Mr. Moderator, Mr. Delapena, I have taken a lot of time to study the Aadhaar system in India, including going to the creators of Aadhaar and spending time and talking to them. They probably have 7 or 9 cases that went to the Supreme Court. One of them is a 1400 opinion that Chairman Minister Chuck mentioned. What happened, and the Aadhaar card, the Supreme Court made it not mandatory. You have it is a voluntary choice. But what happened in India, and what I expect to happen here, is that after all those court cases and issues, the card was issued by under Prime Minister Modi. Even where you have a lot of people who are not literate, because of the still limited, I think they have a little bit more biometrics than we have, but even with what they have, people who are illiterate were able to get all their benefits, could conduct their gas station transactions, their shopping transaction with the card, and after a relatively short while, really and truly, what operates in India is Aadhaar. Not the passport, not any other ID, and I expect that will happen in Jamaica, because as banks, well, the Commissioner of Taxes here, he's making arrangements where, as you know, Commissioner, I've praised your system for property taxes and other tax arrangements that I stay at my home and do in the middle of the night or whenever I want, and it works. When NIDS comes into place, and that becomes much more acceptable, and especially if the Commissioner of Taxes will move to say, you have NIDS, this is all you have to provide to us, because we now trust it. You're going to find that people move very quickly to that, and the acceptance in practice, while de jure it's not mandatory, in practice you're going to find that in every day, everybody's going to say, you know something, show me, give me a NIDS. That's what I want because that's safe, that's secure, and the information is very secure on some server. So I expect Mr. Della Pena, the questioner, I want to answer that question. I've heard them say it. Other people say it as well, that it's probably toothless. You have no idea how this is going to change a country once it gets going, because I've seen it change in a country of 1.3 billion people, and it really works.
And may I just add to Mr. Della Pena that to say it's a toothless tiger. First of all, the NIDS card will be a game changer, as Minister Hill has pointed out, very beneficial to access services. But one of the concerns people had was that the card would have been used for security purposes for crime fighting. It was never meant to be. The card was never meant to be a crime fighting tool, although the Act provides for authentication, validation of the information. So the Commissioner of Police might well be able to apply to the court for the validation of identification. The Commissioner of Police nor the police will have any access to the data. Right. So it will be a bit beneficial where, for instance, a picture is seen of a person and the question is, who is this? They could easily ask the NIRA to verify who is this person. Or for that matter, if a fingerprint is found, it could ask the NIRA to find out whose fingerprints are these. But there's a process. They have to go to the court to get that opportunity to verify that information. So it's not going to be a toothless tiger.
Okay. So you heard the answer there, Floyd, on social media. Another question coming in on Facebook from Sarah Buckland, and she's asking, since NIDS is voluntary now, is there a provision in the bill to prevent any public and private institution from having their own mandate with the NIDS card?
Well, when you put it that way, it may be that, let us say, I don't think that PICA, that government agencies are going to insist that it is mandatory. But what PICA or TAJ or a private institution or the banks might say, without the NIDS card, I can't give you service. You can't stop a private sector from exercising that freedom of choice. A bank might say, I don't trust any other identification but the NIDS card, and that is their right. It might be difficult for a government agency to do that because of the Charter of Rights, but that doesn't stop a private agency from saying, I need the NIDS card.
Okay. All right, a question to the NIDS team here from Shirley Richards on YouTube. Can someone with dual nationality be on the board or inspectorate?
Good one.
It's a very good question. And while they look for it, I'm going to pose a question in the meantime to Mr. Vernon. Yesterday or the day before, you would have said card can be renewed at any time before the expiration date. So just please clarify to the viewers, what do you mean by that?
Okay, thank you, Richard. So what we meant by that is anytime, whenever a card is lost or stolen, the National Identification and Registration Authority will initiate a renewal process. And it makes sense because what you want to happen is that if your card is stolen and you go to an enrollment center to replace the card, you want to capture new information, fresh information, and update the system, and then restart the life cycle for that card. So for example, for an adult, the card will expire every 10 years, up to 60, above 60 every 15 years, and for a minor, every 5 years. So the intent to note that a renewal process will be initiated.
Okay, another question. I would have observed on the current card that height and complexion of many citizens are incorrect. How will NIDS address this going forward in terms of accuracy of data on the card?
Well, let us start with the height first. All of our enrollment sites will be equipped with the relevant tools to verify height. As it relates to complexion, we have no system or protocols in place with a complexion. Whatever color you appear before the enrollment officer with, that is what will be captured by the camera and on the system. Naturally, however, the ability to check a face, your complexion is not considered significantly. It's about the shape of the face, and we have the alternate biometric or fingerprint to use, and that is why we are using facial and fingerprint, because we know you may experience changes there.
Okay. All right, Mrs. Williams, I gather that you are ready for us now. Go ahead.
The inspectorate?
Yes.
Yes. So in terms of eligibility, an individual is eligible to be appointed as a member of the board if that individual is a national of Jamaica, is 18 years of age or older, has not been convicted of an offense involving fraud, dishonesty, or moral turpitude, is not or has not been a member of either of the Houses of Parliament, is not or has not been a member of the Council of a municipal corporation, city municipality, or town municipality, has at the time been diagnosed as having a mental disorder, and is a fit and proper person.
I think the simple answer, though, to that question is that dual citizens with dual nationality are not excluded. It's unlike what is happening to members of parliament. If you have dual citizenship, you cannot become a member of parliament. But I don't think that so far, at any rate, that being a member of the inspectorate or being a member of the NERA exclude persons with dual nationality. I mean, unlike members of parliament. Yeah.
All right, so we have a question from a Justice of the Peace here, Chairman, and it's from Mr. Christopher Record on Zoom, and he's asking, as a Justice of the Peace, the request I get regularly is for address verification. If the address is not on the card, how will it be verified?
No, go ahead, Mr. Vernon.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So, similar to the verification of the identity information, it's the same process where the cardholder must authenticate, meaning they must enter a PIN to authorize the agent or the third party to view the address. Once that is done, the address will be revealed to the third party. And to be more specific, if you go to a bank, a financial institution, and they would like to verify your address, their system, you will be able to authenticate using your national identification card by entering your PIN for the card, and there are additional methods that can be used. You can authenticate also using a pattern from your fingerprint, and once that is done, the information will be revealed, the address that is stored on the system, and a log of that verification will be recorded and protected by blockchain, and the owner of the identity will also be notified. And this is very important for transparency, because you want all Jamaicans to be able to see what is happening with their personal information, and for them to report if they see any log that they are not familiar with.
And so this is another benefit that will accrue if you have the card.
Yes.
Because even though the card won't have your address on it, the relevant inquirer can ask the NIRA to verify the address of the individual. And quite frankly, the GP is quite right. A number of GPs, one of the burden they have is to verify the address of persons. Most institutions now require addresses, and many of these citizens don't have electricity bill or a water bill, and they can't verify their address. So the GPs are the ones who are called upon to verify the address. And I suspect once the Act starts to come into play, the GPs are going to be burdened even significantly to verify the addresses of these persons before they actually go on into the database. And apparently every 5 or 10 years, depending on the renewal, the addresses will change in the database.
Well,
if the address changes.
Well, Chairman, through you, I also need to add that one of the reasons, well, the main reason for having for not placing the address on the card is because we know people change their address quite often. There are some people who will change their address every month, some people every week, some people every 6 months. So we want to be able to maintain accurate address. So the cardholder will be able to go online and provide proof of the new address, and for us to keep a record of it on the system. And in addition, we also need to add that persons will be able to go onto the portal and authenticate a card, meaning you can check to see what is on the face of the card and get a match or a mismatch. And that's a simple way, especially for small businesses and the regular man on the street.
What is interesting too, for those persons who were not with us in previous virtual town hall meetings, is that Mr. Vernon even explained that homeless persons will have addresses.
Yes.
So that where they normally frequent most of the time will be the address that will be on this homeless person's database.
Yes.
Right.
Because we don't want to exclude anyone.
Yeah.
All right, we're wrapping up now. I mean, we have 2 more questions or 3 more. A question here coming from Troy Chandler on Zoom. Why not use the current TRN rather than be issued a new NIN?
So we would have explained this at length. When you look at the existing TRN, that the TRN, as mentioned by the Commissioner earlier, is specifically for tax purposes. TRN assigned to corporations, assigned to companies, and also individuals and persons who are not Jamaican. What is recommended for high security system of this nature is that the ID number is generated always, from a new using the same standard, the same quality standard. Because once you're going to take numbers from outside, you're actually introducing additional risk. And the reason also for not using the birth certificate is because we really don't have any universal, unique ID on all of those. So again, it is important for security reasons to start from a new, using a fresh number that is vetted using the same process.
Okay, and we have 2 more questions to go. If an enrolled member is aggrieved by the NIDS Act, what is the process of recourse or for recourse?
If an enrolled individual is aggrieved at any decision of the authority in respect of their identity information, that person can always file an appeal, file a notice of appeal within 28 days after receiving that communication. Once they have filed the notice, it should be accompanied by copies of supporting documents and served on the authority and the inspectorate. Within 7 days of receiving the notice of appeal, the authority shall prepare a written statement with their reasons for their decision and provide this to the appeal tribunal. The appeal tribunal shall then inform the parties to provide them with the relevant information as necessary, and also to inform them of the date of the hearing of the appeal, and that they may appear in person or send a representative on their behalf, and as well summon a witness to represent them as well. Okay. To assist them. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, we're basically out of time. I'm just going to give 30 seconds to Mr. Vernon just to describe for us in 30 seconds at Jamaica, a digital society.
Well, just quickly, a digital society, the way we envisage it, is a place where all Jamaicans can stay at home, use their national ID to authenticate and to access, 99% of the government services. A society where the only thing that you can't do online is to get married. Thank you.
Mr. Powell, I'm going to just give you 30 seconds also to just describe for us what do you see Jamaica in that digital future?
Well, in that digital future, I think we'll be able to facilitate more online services and reduce the need for persons to be in office. And that will bring significant savings in terms of brick and mortar. We'll need less of that. And persons will have a more relaxed atmosphere in which they can conduct their tax businesses.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Winter, how do you see travel in the near future for Jamaicans?
Well, certainly going forward, one of the things that is going to be very critical is the validation and verification of a person's identity in the future, because the threats of transnational crime and things like human smuggling will continue. But certainly with the robust systems that are now being put in place to protect a person's identity, certainly going forward it will ensure that persons traveling from Jamaica with a Jamaican passport, which is an e-passport, and supported by the NIDS, will ensure that the countries that they go to, they can be guaranteed of the identity of the Jamaican coming there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winter. Well said, Mr. Powell, and thank you very much, members of the NIDS panel. Well, folks, we have come to the end of our final Joint Select Committee virtual town hall meeting and the end of our 6th virtual meeting. We would have learned a lot about the NIDS and also the NIR Bill 2020. Remember, you still can view the bill in its entirety on japarliament.gov.jm and make your submissions on the bill to Clerk to the Houses, Gordon House, 81 Duke Street, Kingston, or email clark@japarliament.gov.jm. Also, if you want to watch all of these meetings, you can look at the NIDS Facts pages on YouTube, and you can watch all of them from Town Hall meeting number 1 to this final one. So my name is Richard De La Pena, signing out. I'm handing you back to the chairman. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you very much, Richard De La Pena, for a very good job as this evening's 6th virtual Town Hall meeting moderator. But I would also like to take the opportunity to thank you, Mr. Andrew Winter from PICA, and also Mr. Ainsley Powell from TAJ. I strongly believe that when this NIDS system comes into operation, that both your agencies will be significant beneficiary of the card. There are many other government agencies that will also be beneficial or beneficiary of this card. I am thinking of the NIS, Administrator General, etc. Many other government agencies, all. And I would like to thank all the members of the Joint Select Committee who are online, but also the 4 members and myself who are here, Minister Favour Williams, Aubin Hill, Marsha Smith, and Dwight Sibbles, MP. I want to thank the NIDS team who are here with us, Mrs. Hemmings Allison, Mrs. Miller Williams, Mr. Warren Vernon, and to thank our secretary, Ms. Grayson McFarlane, who has been with us. And this is the end of the Town Hall meetings. We will be moving back to Parliament, the whole team that is the NIDS Secretariat, and all our members on the 11th of February, when we will be looking at some of the written contributions that have been provided or sent to Parliament. I want to thank all the persons who have participated in making this Town Hall meeting a success. We have the stenographers, the photographers, our persons assisting us with our deaf communities. And to say that these Town Hall meetings have been a great open and transparent engagement with the public. We hope members of the public, viewers and listeners, have enjoyed these meetings. If you still have questions, send them to the Parliament and we will respond. So the meeting of the Joint Select Committee is now at an end, and I ask for a motion of adjournment. Thank you very much, and seconded. Meetings adjourned until the 11th of February. We return to Gordon House for the continuation of the Joint Select Committee meetings.
The new NIDS bill has been drafted and is ready for review. We want to hear from you. Go to www.japarliament.gov.jm to download a copy of the new bill. Join the conversation. Make a written submission to Clerk to the Houses, Gordon House, 81 Duke Street, Kingston, or via email clark@japarliament.gov.jm. All written submissions must be sent by Friday, January 29, 2021. Join the process. Let your voice be heard.